Hey, my name is Jude, and we are just 6 months away from WrestleMania 38. And there is one match that a lot of fans would love to see at the grandest stage in them all. The almighty Bobby Lashley versus Beast Incarnate, Brock Lesnar. And to be honest, that is a damn good matchup. You have two alpha male heavyweight destroyers that run through people with explosive power, and they both have successful careers in the world of mixed martial arts, with Lesnar becoming the UFC heavyweight champion and Lashley earning a not too shabby record of 15 wins and 2 losses. So these two guys look intimidating, and they can also legitimately beat the piss out of anyone that crosses their path, essentially making their unstoppable personas much more believable. So putting all of that together, Bobby Lashley versus Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania can be a big time marquee attraction match. But according to various reports, it looks like Lesnar's WrestleMania plans have already been set in stone, with a long-term feud with our tribal chief Roman Reigns that will culminate at WrestleMania 38. And while I don't mind that because the story right now between Reigns and Lesnar is freaking great, I'm also disappointed that the possibility of Lashley versus Lesnar at WrestleMania is pretty much dead. But luckily, we all have the ability to imagine, so I thought to myself, what if a match between Lesnar and Lashley could happen at WrestleMania 38, and how would the story play out? And after some time of thinking, I've came up with what I think could be an entertaining story that can lead to a kick-ass match at WrestleMania that everyone would be clamoring to see. So with that out of the way, this is how I would book Bobby Lashley versus Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania 38. So this booking starts with the 2022 Royal Rumble match. We're about midway through the match and the ring is filled with, let's say, 10 wrestlers or so. It doesn't matter who they are. They're having the match as per usual, and then the countdown for the next participant starts. And once it reaches 0, out comes Bobby Lashley. Everyone in the ring stops and they just turn their focus on the impending monster. Once Lashley enters the ring, everyone just charges towards him. They crowd around him and they start laying the boots to him until Lashley hulks up, and then he just goes boom, and everyone just flies off of him. He then goes to run through everybody like an unstoppable freight train. Power slams, spine busters, spears, all the good stuff. He just destroys everything in sight. We then get a nice shot of Lashley just posing in the middle of the ring while he's just surrounded by several prone bodies. This makes Lashley look like an unstoppable monster, but what comes next? Then the Rumble countdown starts again. Bobby notices it and he goes to prepare for the next participant, who turns out to be Brock Lesnar. Immediately the cameras cut back to Lashley, who just straightens up. Brock enters the ring and the two men have an intense stare down. They size each other up, they're just jaw-jacking each other, and then eventually they get into a big fight. It's just 1 minute of these two human-sized behemoths fighting it out with ferocious offense and power. The brawl ends with a high-impact move that takes them both down. They lie on their backs for a little while just to let the crowd soak in what just happened. They slowly get back to their feet, and once they do, they're suddenly attacked by the remaining wrestling participants, who have been slowly recovering while the two men were having it out. One half of the group takes Lashley to one corner and start beating him up, while the other half, they take Lesnar to the opposite corner and do the same thing. The wrestlers just clobber the Beast and the Almighty for a little bit until the two powerhouses hulk up and they start fighting back. We then get a fun little sequence of Brock and Bobby just unleashing superpower destruction. Brock takes the wrestlers that are attacking him to Suplex City, while Lashley unleashes power slams and spine busters to those attacking him. The two men then proceed to eliminate those wrestlers. They just pick them up and just whoop, chuck them over the top rope like they're cruiserweights. Once all that is done, Lashley and Lesnar, they back up into the middle of the ring until they bump into each other. They turn around and look at each other like, oh yeah, you're here. And they just start fighting again. It goes for another minute until the two men pull off another high impact maneuver that ends up eliminating them both out of the match at the same time. They scramble back to their feet and immediately they get in each other's faces. They're not done fighting yet. Until a bunch of WWE refs and securities, they appear and they just peel the two heavyweights apart. Bobby and Brock, they're forced to the back, but they just keep looking at each other with intense stares. This thing is not over yet. Then the next night on Raw, Lashley comes down to the ring with MVP and the rest of the Hurt Business. MVP talks about what happened at the Rumble, saying that the Almighty could have easily won that match if it wasn't for some ponytail farm boy asshole. MVP then just goes off on Brock, saying that he ain't man enough to fight Lashley one-on-one. And at that point, Lesnar's music hits and he comes down to the ring with Paul Heyman. Now, there's a bit of conflict between those two in the real life storyline involving Roman Reigns, but for the sake of this booking, I want to keep these two guys together. Because they're a great act, and the back and forth promos between MVP and Paul Heyman, that's just too good to pass up. The two managers then go into a promo war. Heyman gives credit to Bobby Lashley, but then he immediately goes into hyping up Brock Lesnar and says that all of his accomplishments completely eclipse Bobby Lashley's. MVP fires back with his own comebacks. They just go at it. And hopefully the crowd get into it. I'm pretty sure they will. After a few minutes of this, Brock Lesnar grabs Paul Heyman's microphone. He then proceeds to hurl a snarky, Lesnar-esque one-liner at Bobby Lashley. Lashley gets really annoyed at this, and he grabs MVP's microphone and fires back an insult of his own. The two heavyweights then get into their own promo war. It's very similar to the trash talking that MMA fighters would get into in real life, where they just throw a bunch of demoralizing yet entertaining insults that get the crowd going wild. Brock can say something like, "Oh yeah, Bobby, you did MMA? Well, you fought in a second-rate promotion, so that don't mean shit, buddy." Bobby can fire back with something like, "Oh yeah, you want to talk about MMA? Well, with my last fight, I won legitimately, while you won with the help of some supplements." You know, just have them unleash verbal jabs that can really get under each other's skin. This goes for about 2 to 3 minutes, ending with Brock Lesnar going, "You know, all this talk, it's really pissing me off." He then takes off his sleeveless flannel and he's like, "Come on, Bobby, let's finish what we started last night, let's go!" Bobby sees this, he starts laughing, but then suddenly he just chucks the microphone in Lesnar's face. This distracts Lesnar long enough for the rest of the Hurt Business to blindside the Beast Incarnate. Lashley joins in on the attack, and then we get a visual of the Hurt Business just beating the absolute piss out of Brock Lesnar, while Heyman is cowering in the corner with a shocked expression. Once they have Brock down and out, Lashley just stands over him with a cocky grin on his face. And then, because he's a dick, Bobby Lashley attacks Paul Heyman. Lashley grabs Paul, locks him into the Hurt Lock, and just wrenches the submission really tight until Heyman just passes out. Then the segment ends with Lashley standing over the prone bodies of Brock Lesnar and Paul Heyman with the rest of his Hurt Business buddies, looking like a triumphant jackass. Then, after the commercial break, the commentators notify us that Brock Lesnar and Paul Heyman have been taken to WWE's, what do they call it? Local medical facility or some garbage. They announced that both men will be gone for some time. On next week's Raw show, Lashley is wrestling a mid-card wrestler and he is absolutely squashing the poor dude. And in the match, Bobby gets a little bit cheeky and starts using some of Brock Lesnar's signature moves. He takes his opponent to Suplex City and then drops him with an F5 for the win. After the match, Lashley grabs a microphone, stares straight into the hard camera, and he says something like, "Hey Brock, since I whipped your ass the other week, it's only fair that I take some of your moves with me, because I'm the Almighty, and you ain't shit compared to me." We then move on to next week's Raw, and Lashley is pretty much doing the exact same thing, but only this time, he taps out his opponent with the Chimera Lock. And after Lashley's cutting another trash-talking promo on Lesnar, he is interrupted by Damian Priest. He comes out and he says that he's just sick and tired of Lashley's bullcrap. He says to Bobby, "Why don't you pick a fight with somebody that can whip your ass? Why don't you pick a fight with me. Lashley, who's looking visibly pissed at Damian, he says, "Fine. I'll see you at Elimination Chamber." So we get to the Elimination pay-per-view, and Lashley and Priest, they have their match. It's a more competitive match this time for Bobby, and a bit of a showcase for Damian Priest. But in the end, the Almighty overpowers Damian Priest. Boom! Big spear, and then 1, 2, 3, clean, in the middle of the ring. But that's not enough for Bobby. He's still pissed at Damian Priest, so he just keeps beating the crap out of him once the match is over. Bobby then locks Priest into a hurt lock and just wrenches the hold, just exerting pain, dominance over the poor guy. But just before Priest passes out, Brock Lesnar's music hits, and the Beast Incarnate makes his big return. He sprints down to the ring and beats the absolute piss out of Bobby Lashley. The rest of the Hurt Business run down the ring to help out Lashley, but they eat a bunch of German suplexes from an enraged Brock Lesnar. Brock then plants Lashley with a big F5, and then he just starts shit-talking to Lashley while he's down and out. Lesnar then locks Lashley in a Chimera lock, and then he tries to break Lashley's arm. But MVP saves Lashley, who starts whacking Lesnar with his cane gimmick thing. Brock lets go of Lashley and starts beating the crap out of MVP. German suplexes, and then planting him with a big F5. After that, Lesnar turns around and finds that Lashley has retreated up the ramp. Bobby just stares at the carnage of the ring with an expression mixed with anger and shock, while Brock is looking back at Bobby with an intense stare, daring him to come down to the ring. Then the segment ends with the two men staring daggers at each other. We move on to the Raw show after the pay-per-view, and it starts off white hot. During the Raw intro video, it is interrupted by the commentator saying there's something going on backstage. We cut to backstage, and it's Brock Lesnar and Bobby Lashley having a huge brawl in the locker room. The WWE security, they rush in and they try to peel the two monsters apart, but Lashley and Lesnar, they're just too powerful. They just lay out those security guys like nothing before going back to fighting. The brawl spills out onto the stage, and they just fight all the way down the ramp and all around the ring. Then the entire Raw Men's locker room come out, and after about a full minute, they just barely manage to pull Lesnar and Lashley apart. Then Sonya Deville and Adam Pearce come out, and they say something like, "Okay, this has gone far enough, guys. We know that you two want to fight, and it's very clear that the people want to see you two fight. So, Bobby Lashley, Brock Lesnar, you will be going one-on-one against each other at WrestleMania 38. Deville and Pearce pause for a moment just to let the crowd cheer for the huge announcement, before going on to say, "But we can't have this chaos go on any further. So from now until WrestleMania, if either one of you even lay a finger on each other, your match will be called off and you'll both be suspended." Lashley and Lesnar, they reluctantly acknowledge the rule, and then we get a cool visual of the two men just glaring at each other while being held back by the entire Raw roster, just to show off the critical threat level of these two superhuman monsters. Then we move on to Fastlane, where Bobby and Brock have another promo segment before their big match. They're accompanied by their respective managers, Paul Heyman and MVP, who have recovered from the attacks that they suffered the weeks prior. The two managers have another dueling promo, but within that, I want Paul Heyman to highlight this key point. Even with everything that Brock Lesnar has accomplished throughout his MMA and pro wrestling career, he has never seen his client more focused, more determined, more motivated, and more angrier than what he is right now, just to make Bobby Lashley feel like an even bigger deal than he already is. And then Brock Lesnar grabs the microphone and says something along the lines of this: "Bobby, even with everything that's happened between us, I respect what you've done in your career. But if you really think you're better than me, you've got another thing coming, buddy. At WrestleMania, I'ma take you to Suplex City, and I'm gonna paste your ass all around this ring and show the whole world that I am the top of the food chain, while you ain't nothing more but a second-rate version of me." Bobby stares at Lesnar with a look of annoyance, and then he grabs MVP's microphone and he says something along the lines of this: "Brock, the respect goes both ways. I appreciate what you've done for this business and what you've done for MMA. But that's where it stops. You think you're the most dominant force on this planet. And to me, that is all a bunch of bullshit. You got lucky at Elimination Chamber. And on April 3rd, I'm gonna prove it. At WrestleMania, I'ma destroy you, I'ma dismantle you, and I'ma tear your stupid country bearded face apart. And when it's all said and done, I'ma be standing over you. And at that point, everyone will realize that I am the Almighty. And you, Brock? They'll see you nothing more than a little farm boy bitch. Lesnar gets visibly pissed at Lashley's final statement. The two men are about to get in each other's faces before their managers separate them and keep them apart. So the segment wraps up there, and from that point until WrestleMania, I'm gonna try to keep those two guys as far apart from each other as possible. I'm also gonna take some ideas from my How WWE Should Have Booked Cesaro fantasy video and put them here. It's a bit lazy, I know, but I think those ideas will work wonders for this feud. So leading up to WrestleMania, I'm going to play videos of Brock Lesnar and Bobby Lashley going through these intense training programs in preparation for their match. There'll also be a long video package that highlights both men's dominance and accomplishments, both in pro wrestling and in MMA. In that video, there'll be statements of pro wrestlers and MMA fighters that have come to blows with Lesnar and Lashley, and they just highlight how powerful those two are. I want Triple H and Vince McMahon himself to be in that video package and have them both talk about how destructive Bobby and Brock have been in WWE. If it's also possible, I want Dana White and Scott Coker to be a part of the video package as well. Dana White can give his thoughts on how prominent Brock Lesnar was in UFC, and Scott Coker can share his thoughts on how dominant Lashley was in Bellator. This video package alone will give Lesnar and Lashley a huge, larger-than-life feel to their unstoppable personas, and will also elevate the excitement for their match in a big way. And for the Go Home Raw show, the main event will be a special weigh-in segment between Lashley and Lesnar. That way we can give this match a big fight feel. Sonya Deville and Adam Pearce will be a part of it, as well as Triple H and Vince McMahon, just to make this segment feel really important. There'll also be a bunch of security guards in the ring, just in case things go bad. Brock and Bobby, they have their weigh-ins, and then they stand face to face. Adam Pearce and Triple H, they get in between the two men and keep them apart, while the security around them, they prepare themselves in case things turn sideways. But a fight doesn't break out, and then two men have another verbal spar to close off the show. And now we finally get to the match itself. Bobby Lashley versus Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania. Bobby comes out first with the rest of the Hurt Business, but he tells Cedric and Shelton to head to the back, saying that he can take on Lesnar by himself. Brock Lesnar comes out next with Paul Heyman, and as soon as the match starts, the two men get straight into it. There's no rest holds, there's no tie-up. Right from the get-go, the action starts white hot. The match starts out with heavyweight MMA combat, and then it slowly evolves into glorious, explosive pro wrestling action. The match goes for about 10 to 15 minutes, and the two big hosses, they just unleash everything on each other. Neither one of them can get a clear advantage, just to show that this is truly an epic clash between two super titans. Lesnar kicks out of a spear and breaks out of a hurt lock, while Lashley, he kicks out of an F5 and breaks out of the Chimera lock, thus heightening the drama and the excitement for this match. And then we get to the final act. Running out of options, Brock Lesnar sets up Bobby Lashley onto his shoulder for a running power slam, one of Bobby Lashley's old finishing moves. But then Bobby just moves and then he gets out of it. And as he gets out, he hoovers up Lesnar onto his shoulder for a power slam setup. But instead of hitting the running power slam, Bobby stops, squats, and then he throws Lesnar right into the air, catching him back down with a fireman's carry, and then he plants the Beast Incarnate with a big F5, like how Brock did to The Undertaker all those years ago. And hopefully the crowd go nuts for this spot. Lashley covers Brock, the ref counts 1, 2, but then Lashley breaks up the pin. The ref stares at Lashley looking like, dude, what's going on? And Bobby's just like, No, not this way. Lashley then goes to the corner and sets up for one final spear as Lesnar struggles to get back on his feet. And then as he turns around, boom! Lashley hits Brock with one last epic spear. He then follows up quickly with the Hurt Lock submission move. Bobby puts all of his strength into this one, and Lesnar tries to fight and fight and fight, but sadly he is too weakened to break out. And then slowly but surely, Brock Lesnar passes out. Yes, I'm putting over Bobby Lashley in this feud, because he's still going to be around in WWE for the next few years as a full-time wrestler. So what better way to completely establish Bobby Lashley as WWE's resident superhuman monster and raise his value up as a main event commodity by having him destroy the established freak of nature Brock Lesnar in clean and convincing fashion. So Bobby Lashley wins, and after the match, he stands over the prone body of Brock Lesnar and poses in victory, while the Hurt Business are cheering him on in the background, and Heyman is just on the other side just looking gobsmacked. I think that'll be a badass visual that wraps up this Super Titan grudge feud, ending with the Almighty conquering the Beast incarnate. So that's how I would book Bobby Lashley versus Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania 38. What do you guys think? If you have any thoughts, feel free to lay them down in the comments section below. But yep, that's all I have for today. Until next time, take care guys.